Hello, I'm Julie Simmons. I'm a professor in the Department of Political Science at the University of Guelph, and my research interests pertain to the role of civil society actors in the development and implementation of intergovernmental policy agreements in Canada. And this has many parallels with some of the policy development processes in the European Union, and in particular the open method of coordination. And if I were to compare the European Union to Canada, I would say that the European Union is a much more transparent policy-making process where citizens and advocacy organizations have a much better understanding of decisions and processes affiliated with European Union social policy making than is the case in intergovernmental social policy developments in Canada. In Canada, the development of these kinds of agreements that pertain to social policy and involve both provinces and the federal government tend to be made in very closed-door environments. And non-governmental actors are involved in those processes in a very ad hoc kind of way. Sometimes individual governments choose to consult with community organizations and citizens within their own jurisdiction, and other times the federal and provincial governments together will collectively engage non-governmental actors, but this is extremely rare. And in contrast, in the European setting, there are firmly established processes and funding for the inclusion of non-governmental actors in those kinds of decision-making processes. Now, with respect to accountability as a form of, or as a dimension of democracy, and the role of citizens and advocacy organizations in ensuring government accountability for decisions that are made in intergovernmental settings. Again, the open method of coordination is much more developed than is the Canadian variant, which would be public reporting by individual jurisdictions for how monies are spent from the federal government in areas of social policy. And while the open method of coordination has been criticized in the literature, in the academic literature, on a variety of fronts, it again has a far more institutionalized role for non-governmental actors than do the public reporting exercises in Canada. Also, the open method of coordination is much more oriented towards a learning across jurisdictions. So governments agree to put forward publication of their results to meeting commonly set goals. And those governments can then reflect upon their performance vis-a-vis other governments within the European Union. And there is a process through the open method of coordination for revisiting whether or not changes have been made in individual jurisdictions to improve social policy outcomes. In Canada, when it comes to public reporting and social policy developments, provinces often do agree to report information to the public. However, because this is considered an infringement on their autonomy vis-a-vis the federal government, oftentimes provinces are not forthcoming with that information. And when they are forthcoming and the federal government is forthcoming with information, it's not all coordinated in one spot like it is in the open method of coordination. Therefore, it's quite difficult for citizens in Canada to access reports, to be able to compare governments, their performance on poverty reduction, their performance on labor market agreements to encourage labor force participation and so on. So the question is then, can Canada learn from the open method of coordination? And here I think Canada can learn, but Canada has to adopt something a little bit different. And the reason why is because in Europe, the center that is involved in developing benchmarks and goals with the open method of coordination are the member states themselves. Whereas in Canada, when the center develops those kinds of goals, whether it's to do with healthcare or other aspects of social policy, it's usually involving the federal government with the provinces, and the federal government's role at the table is contested among provinces. So the question of the legitimacy of the federal government calling the shots, so to speak, in areas of provincial jurisdiction is highly contested. So as a result, I don't think it's feasible in Canada to anticipate a more robust form of public reporting and citizen engagement and social inclusion like we see in the open method of coordination. However, it is possible that the provinces themselves might decide to engage in something similar to the dialogue that we see through the open method of coordination. And they have the Council of the Federation, which is only provincial premiers meeting. And it is my argument that they could develop learning tables under the Council of the Federation in various social policy areas and include societal actors there in discussions about what's taking place in a variety of different provincial contexts in terms of social policy development, and learn from each other there without having the federal government so intimately involved, and also without the question of money from the federal government driving the discussion among the provinces. So hopefully then there are things that Canada can learn about the governance regimes that are established in the European Union, but I argue that it's not necessarily importing them as they are in the European Union in the Canadian context. We need our own variant of the governance regimes that we see in the European Union.